Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about how feedback delays affect speed of decision making. Today's show is an explanation of how control systems operate. We're going to start with a pretty simple control system that most of us are familiar with. Imagine you're behind the steering wheel of a car. In fact, some of you are probably in your car right now as you're listening to this. When you turn the wheel to the left, the car goes left. Turn the wheel to the right, and the car performs as expected. The delay between turning the steering wheel and the effect on the direction of the car is pretty short. It's well under 1 second. It feels pretty instantaneous. But imagine for a moment that instead of that instantaneous response, there was a 2-second delay. You turn the steering wheel, and a full 2 seconds go by. 1,000, 1,000. Then the car starts to turn left. Think about how much more difficult it would be to make driving decisions if there was just a 2-second delay. Now extend that delay to 10 seconds. Imagine there was a 10-second delay. How much more difficult would it be if there was a 10-second delay between making the decision to turn the car and you starting to see the effect of your decision? Imagine if the delay was 24 hours. Okay, hopefully you're getting the idea. So I'd like you to keep that idea in the back of your mind. We're going to apply that same concept to the control system that's currently steering our economy. Specifically, the impact of government decisions to increase or relax social isolation regulations. This is another control system just like steering a car. This is going to be a layperson's explanation, and hopefully I'm able to make it understandable. Please let me know if this worked for you or not. So we're going to design this hypothetical control system that government would use to determine how much social isolation is going to be required to keep the pandemic under control. Turn the wheel to the right, you have more social isolation, you reduce the spread of the disease. You turn the wheel to the left, you have less social isolation, and the disease spreads more quickly. Government is monitoring data that's coming from the testing that's happening all over the country. They're using the number of reported cases. They're looking at the number of people being hospitalized. All of this data is being used to make a decision on how strict an isolation policy is required to stop the spread of the pandemic. So the question is, when do they need to impose a stricter isolation policy? The economic damage that results from a complete shutdown is extremely painful, and there is not consensus among the population that a full lockdown is warranted. So if not now, then when? Presumably, the politicians will make a decision to impose stricter isolation rules when the number of cases reported and the number of people being admitted to hospital starts to climb to alarming levels. They will also monitor the number of deaths. In any control system, the delay between making a decision and seeing the results of that decision affects the speed with which you can make decisions. So let's figure out how government officials can even hope to make a decision before seeing the effect of that decision. The incubation period of the disease seems to be averaging about a week. In fact, a paper published in mid-August put the incubation period at 7.7 days on average. That's the amount of time between someone contracting the disease and the onset of symptoms. So then someone with symptoms, they line up, they get tested at a public health testing site, and they probably get their results in about 4 days. Some are faster, but now you're up to 11 days before you have a positive diagnosis. It takes a while for symptoms to worsen. So you're looking at another 10 to 12 days before being admitted to hospital, and then another few days before being admitted to intensive care. On average, we're looking at 3 weeks from the time the disease is contracted until someone ends up in hospital. The average hospital stay for a COVID-19 patient is 23 days. In China, it was a little longer at 27 days. So let's add all this up. We're looking at an average of 44 days from the time someone catches the disease until they get released from hospital or they die. That delay means the results of any decision made on day one won't appear for another 44 days. In fact, the data that shows up in 44 days won't be conclusive. So that's just the beginning of the turn. So in order for a trend to establish itself, you need to wait nearly double the delay before you have a visible trend resulting from the decision. I'm not going to go through all the math to prove to you mathematically why this is the case. Just take it on faith that we're going to be looking at a total delay of 88 days for government to gather enough data before they make a second decision. So let's say on day one, they see case numbers creeping up to unacceptable levels. Government officials make a decision to turn right to shut down the economy. It's going to take another 44 days for the first effect of that decision to show up. Meanwhile, the numbers will be continuing to increase up until day 44. Starting at day 45, they're going to start to see improvement. It's going to be slow at first, and it's going to take another 44 days for the results to show up conclusively at the end of the hospital stays. I'm describing a control system mathematically. This is the same as steering a car with a steering wheel that has a delay of 44 days before you see the impact of your decision. Now, based on these simple facts, it's no wonder that governments are oversteering in their attempts to control the pandemic. Almost be impossible not to. And once they make a decision to increase social isolation, their next decision is at least 88 days away. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.